And we're live. Brilliant. Lovely to welcome in everyone. Good to see you all. How are you?
Good, Jane. Good to see you.
Hello.
We have a whole team from Meta here to join us this afternoon. So look, thank you so much for your time, first of all. And happy post-bank holiday weekend. We're off at a bang here again. And everybody, just as everyone's flooding into the room there, it's really busy. So hi to everyone who's joining us. And thank you so much for joining us. We've got loads of really interesting information to share. So where to start? Okay, a tiny bit of housekeeping before we get going. So look, firstly, for anyone who hasn't been here before, I'm Jane. I head up the Career Services and Code Institute, and we're going to introduce all of our lovely guests now from Meta in a couple of minutes. We have the chat function, so please do use it. And it's, there's tons of information to be gathered and shared here, and massively invaluable for any of you who are going ahead with an application process to Meta. So please do close the browsers and take this in. So the chat function, brilliant, is lovely and busy. The Q&A function is right there beside the chat function. So look, the team here are going to bring us through a presentation, but just be aware, if you have questions, please try and use the Q&A function so that we don't lose them in all of the nice conversation. And that's about it. The other important thing is that today is being recorded. It will be in our Careers Hub ASAP. So if you need to duck out early or you want to revisit this, you can, and please do before you put this application in. And that's it. So listen, what I might do is hand over now to all you guys from Meta. And I know we have some information to go through, so we can all introduce ourselves and have a look at these slides.
Cool. Sounds good. Let me just try and start this presentation.
Oh, well done.
Technology. Thanks, Jane. And hi, everyone. Good to be back again. I've spoken with the Code Institute before, so thanks for the opportunity to chat to you about the Discover Production Engineering Program. So what we're going to cover in our slides, we're going to go through speaker introductions. I'm going to tell you a bit about production engineering at Meta, what it is, and a little bit about the program. We've got Kieran, an alumnus of the Code Institute, to tell you about, and a current DPE, who's going to tell you about his experience, so that's kind of cool. And we've got Emily and Matt here from our recruiting organization that can tell you about the application process, what to expect, and answer any questions you have on that side of things. Okay, so without further ado, let's jump in. So I'll start. My name is Carl McCabe. I'm a production engineering manager with Meta, formerly known as Facebook. I've been with the company for almost 5 years. It'll be 5 years in May, actually. And what I'm responsible for is an area called systems lifecycle. So basically, it's the set of software systems that manage the lifecycle of servers at Meta. So when all of our servers come into our data centers and we need to get them ready to run production traffic, we provision them, put an operating system on them, get them configured and ready for production, get the capacity ready quickly and efficiently and reliably. We have systems for moving it around and managing that capacity while it's in production. And then at the end of lifecycle, we unprovision it, make sure that all the user and customer data is safely and securely removed, and manage the end of life. So the whole life cycle of servers. So that's what I do. Kieran, do you want to say hi?
Yeah, I'm Kieran. I'm currently doing the DPE program here at Meta. Would have started in September this time last year. I was doing Code Institute, watching a webinar on the DPE program. And I'm currently working with the OpenBMC team here at Meta, which manages the reliability of BMC chips, which are sort of small devices on servers that you can log in, manage the server, gather metrics about what's happening, and just basically help towards keeping everything running and reliable here at Meta. So it's been great so far.
Cool.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. I'm Emily. I lead the recruiting team here in London. I've been at Meta for just shy of 5 years now. And my team covers everything from apprentices all the way through to new graduates, PhD graduates, and also programs such as DPE. So really excited to hopefully see some applications, and I really hope you enjoy today and learn a little bit more about the program as well. So really nice to meet you all. Pass to Matt.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Matt. I've been at Meta now for around 4 months, and I look after the day-to-day recruitment activities across a range of different programs, including this Discover Product Engineering program. So I'll be kind of managing the recruitment day-to-day. So for example, if you apply and get through to the first stage, you'll get an email from me, that kind of thing. So I'm really excited to see you all here today.
Thanks, Matt. Okay. So what is production engineering? Let me start there. I mean, I think I'm going to open my phone here because I have some notes that I wanted to make sure I covered them. So production engineers are engineers that have a blend of different skills. So they tend to be people who understand how to write software. They understand something about systems, both Linux systems, but also how to kind of design distributed systems and think about large-scale systems as well as small-scale systems. And they'll often have some knowledge of networking as well, especially depending on the team that they're in. And what their expertise is the knowledge that's required to run systems in production at the scale that we run at Meta, which is obviously supporting billions of users globally with our platforms. So there are two styles of team that we have. In one case, we have production engineers that are embedded in teams with software engineers. And they work on the same problems, but they tend to focus on issues like, scalability, designing for reliability, and really the production aspects of the problem domain. And then we have the other model, which is the one that we use in Dublin, in fact, which is where the teams are fully production engineering and they own all aspects of the problem domain that they're working on. From idea inception through coming up with an architecture, design, implementation, testing it, deploying it into production, and then owning that while it's in production and providing support for that. So the work really does span a whole range of different disciplines here in Dublin. So we're coming live from the Meta office in Dublin, and here in Dublin we work on everything from kind of the software container level that runs our services all the way down to the dirt, right? So networking and servers and data centers and all the systems that run all of that kind of problem domain. That's the area that we focus on. The things that make a successful production engineer are not always things that are taught in university. It's something I guess we've realized over the years. There's sort of certain traits that are kind of common to production engineers, things like curiosity, things like being able to build momentum, being able to collaborate super strongly with people, being able to catalyze solutions to problems. This is kind of a way I describe it sometimes. Like a production engineer is the kind of person who would, find a problem within our infrastructure or come across it or be told about it, and they will catalyze that solution. So they will be the one that will bring the technical parts of the problem together and bring, importantly, the people together to work on solving that problem. So there's that sort of a collaborative element. There's that sort of a curiosity, kind of poking at things that don't quite seem right. All of these are skills that are not, they're life skills, right? They're personality traits. So what we found over the years is that a lot of very successful production engineers within Meta come from all sorts of different backgrounds, what we maybe call traditional backgrounds. They've studied computer science or engineering in university, but also non-traditional backgrounds too. And this is what led us to, introduce the Discover PE program. So Discover Production Engineering program, I'll go into it a little bit more detail after Kieran that's in a second, but basically it's a 12-month opportunity to sit with a real production engineering team in Dublin or in London to work on real engineering problems alongside your co-workers in the team here. And gain real experience that will help you on the rest of your career. So after the 12 months, what we would love to happen is we offer you a full-time job. So people who can demonstrate the aptitude to succeed in a full-time role within production engineering will get a job offer. And there isn't a limit to how many people we will convert. There isn't a target. We would love if everybody is successful and everybody ends up with successful careers at Meta. Worst case is at the end of it, you've got 1 year working with Meta on real scalability and reliability challenges in the real world. As I said, I'm going to get Kieran to chat a little bit. I did mention that this is a program for people from non-traditional backgrounds. Kieran's a great example of that, actually. So I'm actually going to stop the presentation so you can see him properly.
It's nice to meet everyone. So yeah, I have been doing this since around September. And my own background for this was I was a child protection social worker for about 5.5, 6 years. So totally unrelated to tech. When I applied for this position around this time last year, I would have been maybe just beginning my milestone 3. So that's where I would have been in the course, Code Institute wise. So, and before that, I would have maybe started learning to code around the April beforehand. So, but that would have been maybe part-time outside of full-time work. So that gives a rough idea in terms of the level of experience I would have had before applying for this. I guess my reason for applying at the time was, hearing about the type of technology that you'd be working with in here. It just sounded so incredibly cool. Didn't expect the interview process would go successfully. So even if you think you don't have the prerequisite knowledge of things like what a system engineer is day to day, network engineering, if all of that sounds a bit alien, still, if this sounds like something that would interest you, it's worth going for it. And the experience so far in the DPE has been the level of, I suppose, autonomy in terms of the project that you're given, that 12-week project that's been mentioned, has really been amazing. It's I suppose at the moment everyone is working on their own milestone projects, and that gives a good base in terms of having ownership over your own project, setting goals and trying to figure out problems, working with taking in data through an API and giving the right feedback, managing errors, all of that. But this is to another level in terms of the scale and the type of problems that you're working with. So I definitely would, recommend looking into, I suppose, if this area of work does interest you, and the level of autonomy that you have, as I say, has really been amazing, and that you get the guidance from a mentor, on your team, and that's really been invaluable. And the other thing, besides the sheer scale of what you're working with, I suppose the other thing that's really surprised me and has helped me in beginning, coming from a non-traditional background, is just how open and helpful everybody is. There's a real culture in here of, it doesn't matter what team somebody's on, they will try their best to help you out and signpost you. And if they can't, they'll point you towards the person that can. So there's a massive network of support in here, even if it is new to you, if it's your very first tech role. So for me, so far, it's been absolutely fantastic experience. So yeah, that's been my story up till now.
Cool. Nice one. Thanks, Karen. Let me go back to the presentation here again. Okay. So just a little bit more detail on the program itself. So as Kieran mentioned, you start off with a 3-month project. So when you join the program, so the current cohort of which Kieran's a part, they started last September. So the very first part of the process is you go through what's known as bootcamp. Bootcamp is something that not just people in the DPE program go through, but all engineers and all engineering managers do the same bootcamp experience. And bootcamp is a mixture of kind of self-guided learning and courses, and working with a bootcamp mentor to work on real problems. So teams across Facebook can create what are known as bootcamp tasks. They're different levels of complexity. 1 is super easy, 4 is more complex. So in week 1, you're actually making coding changes and shipping them to production and changing production systems at Meta, which is kind of a core part of our philosophy. You just need to get in and do it and try it. And you've got help from your bootcamp mentor to guide you through that experience. The core bootcamp process takes 3 or 4 weeks. I should know this. 3 weeks.
5, I think it was. Up until 5. Yeah, it was for us.
Yeah, cool. And then when you transition out of the bootcamp process, then you're working on your project. You have a bootcamp mentor who then sort of hands over, I suppose, to your team mentor, and the team mentor is somebody you'll work with throughout the rest of the program. And the team mentor is somebody who is typically reasonably tenured. They've been at the company for a little while. They're reasonably senior. They know what they're doing. They know how things work here, and that's important that they can help you to be successful and answer the questions you have. As Kieran says, you don't just rely on your mentor. There's a really strong ecosystem of engineers who've all been through a similar process of learning and discovery. So everybody's willing to help. So that project lasts for about 3 months. At the end of the project, then you kind of move into the sort of team integration phase. During the project, you're sitting with the team. During COVID, we weren't sitting together, but sort of virtually with the team. Luckily, we're able to come back to the office now if we want to. But during the team integration phase, you're with the team. You may still be continuing kind of follow-on work from the project if there's more work to be done there. And you're just starting to be part of the team, taking part in the team rituals, and working on the same tasks and the same projects that the rest of the team work on. It's a key part of the way we go about, both internships and the Discover PE program, is that we don't give other work to people who are doing DPE. They work on the core things, working on the actual systems that all the rest of their colleagues are working on. It's a real experience that people get. Okay, so what have I not covered in this? I mean, I guess I think I've probably covered most of this already. The key thing is you're coming away with a real world experience. So, for example, on call, if the team does on call, and most teams do, in engineering functions, including at Meta, then you will also experience what it's like to be on call for your team. Answering questions that people have about your services from other internal customers within Meta, other teams that use your tooling. And again, that's done in a supportive way where you're sort of helped to get up to speed with that. There is a very supportive network of former DPs. So I assume you've got a DP mentor as well, who's somebody who's graduated from the program. So the program has run since 2018. It's been, we've had two years in North America. This is our first year. The cohort that Kieran's in is the first year doing it in EMEA, which is Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And there are former alumni of DP who also help the current cohort to do well. And hopefully, Kieran will be doing the same for the next intake later on. What else have I not said? So I guess just to kind of wrap up on my part. So the key thing here is that, we want you to succeed, and the environment is all dedicated to helping you succeed. And success is to spend a year working at Meta. Whether or not you end up with a full-time position, you've got a launch pad into a new career in this industry, which I think is invaluable. So I really would encourage you to apply. Okay, I think over to Emily.
Thanks, Carl. So I just want to talk a little bit about the recruiting process. So Matt and I will share a bit of information around applications. What does it look like? Just to hopefully kind of demystify the recruitment process for you. Just wanted to start by referencing kind of what we're looking for. And I guess I kind of want to say it's as broad and as open as possible. So we would love to kind of welcome applications from individuals that maybe have kind of non-traditional backgrounds, and who have maybe not studied in a technical capacity before, people who have self-taught their coding skills, maybe they're looking for a secondary career, or coming back to the workforce, maybe having done some kind of bootcamp programming before. But ultimately, this is a program that's going to support individuals who really want to kind of learn from that kind of self-taught coding experience. So we're open as broad and wide. If you're a historian who loves coding, we'd love to hear from you. Similarly, with any background, we'd just love to understand a little bit more about your interest and why kind of our DP program excites. So I'm going to pass over to Matt now, who will talk a little bit more around kind of the key qualifications that we look out for as well.
Perfect. Thanks, Emily. So what I'm going to cover throughout the remainder of the session, I'll talk you through almost what the, typical application process looks like, what we're looking for. And again, great to see some familiar names already in the chat bar of people who've already applied to our program. And hopefully after today, those of you who haven't will go ahead and do so as well. But as Emily touched upon there, we are looking really for individuals from a huge array of backgrounds. And it says there, you can see there the minimum qualifications, 2+ years of experience or full-time work experience in any industry. Now, literally any industry is absolutely okay. whatever experience you have. As long as it is full-time work experience, then that is great, and then you would qualify there. In terms of coding languages, so you can see the 4 of the most common ones listed there. Now, that list isn't necessarily exclusive. So, for example, we have hired candidates before who are familiar with the likes of languages like Ruby and other coding languages. So, again, that list isn't exclusive, but typically we find that if you've got some knowledge of a coding language, you'd be able to then pick up Python fairly easily then once you join. And then experience with configuration and maintenance of applications. So again, that list isn't exhaustive there in terms of the applications that we've listed, and we would welcome applications from those of you who maybe have experience in other areas as well. But overall, what I would say in terms of certainly when you're submitting your CV or your resume for this role, just try to ensure that you're really clearly stating and I guess clarifying how you meet each of these criteria. It just makes it much easier when we're doing that initial eligibility screen to see if you meet those criteria. So, you know, if you've got those 2 years of work experience, really clearly state the dates at which you worked in those roles. You know, what were the timelines? When did you do those? Maybe list them in order of the most recent going down. Again, coding languages. So which languages are you familiar with? What's your experience here? And again, how can you show that you have maintained applications, configured applications there? So just try to make it as clear as possible on your resume or CV if you can. And that way we can then be like, we can, you know, fully say that you have met the criteria and we can then bring you through to the next stage. So in terms of the application process timeline there then, so you can see overall we mentioned earlier in the presentation, around 5 or 6 weeks is typically the timescales for your application. But how it would work is you would apply online through our career site. If you met those initial 3 criteria that I just went through, you would then be invited through to something called a code signal assessment or a technical code signal assessment. And this essentially is an opportunity for you to showcase your technical skills. And I'll come on to exactly what that means in a second. Following the code signal, if you met a certain threshold there, you would then be invited through to the final stages of the process, which again, I'll touch upon, which are typically split into 2 different sections, one with a coding element and then one with a system design and domain and behavioral element there as well. And then if you were successful at that stage, that would be the point at which you would be offered a place on the program with us. So hopefully that's clear, and I'll go through each of these stages now, just to go into a bit more detail about what they involve and how you can best prepare for those. So in terms of the code signal then, so this is an online assessment, it's self-led, and this really is an opportunity for you to showcase your programming skills, your knowledge of CS. So code signal measures code writing and problem solving skills, along with candidates or your ability to produce clean code at a reasonable speed. So as I mentioned, it is self-led. You would receive a link from me where you have around 7 days to complete the testing, and it should take no more than 70 minutes to complete the tasks. And you can code in whatever language you feel most comfortable in. So there's no preference there from our point of view. Whatever you're most comfortable in, whichever you feel would showcase your best abilities, is the one that we would tell you to use. There is a preparation portal available as well, which we can share after today. But overall, just to reiterate, this is a self-led session, so you would receive a link via email from myself. So just make sure that once you've applied, you are checking your emails regularly. What we don't want is you realizing after the 7 days that you've been invited to this. You know, do keep an eye on it. And if needs be, if there are any technical issues, we can set up another link really easily for you as well. If you pass the code signal stage, then, as I mentioned, you would then move on to essentially the final stages of the process. So the coding stage, the system design and domain, and the behavioral interview. So how this typically works is you would have a coding interview separately, and if you pass that stage, you would then be brought through to the final stage, which would be system design and domain, and then the behavioral interview together. So what I'll do now is I'll go through each of these sections and just to give you a bit of information about what that involves and how best to prepare. So you can see here the coding interview. So you'll need to be familiar with this interview with topics such as basic structures like arrays, lists, dictionaries, hash tables, and strings. And you should be comfortable with loops and iterating as well, recursion, search, etc. And the questions can be real world problem or something contrived to use these skills. So again, just be ready for anything in this interview. You will work with a Meta engineer to collaboratively solve this. So again, what I'd really make sure you're doing is go through slowly, ask lots of clarifying questions to make sure that you're understanding exactly what's expected of you during this assessment, and use the Meta engineers there, use them to help to your advantage. They will have the areas of expertise. If you do have some questions that you're not sure about, show that you're thinking through the problem, you're trying to solve it, you're trying to clarify for yourself as well. In the coding environment, we will be using CoderPad. So what I'd recommend doing probably is just familiarizing yourself with this interface if you're not familiar with it already, just so that you're on the day, nothing is new, and then you know exactly where you stand. In terms of the language selection, you can absolutely code in your preferred language. So whatever you feel is going to show your strengths to the best of your abilities. We're not at this stage in this part of the process looking for perfect code or perfect syntax. So don't get too hung up on this. Make sure that you're obviously doing the best you can, but equally don't go away from this interview if you come through to it and then leave thinking, oh, I didn't get that perfect. That means that I'm not going to be offered a place. That's not the case. What we're looking for in the application process for this role is very much your potential to do well with us, rather than your ability that you already have. So just bear that in mind, and don't get hung up on those small things like syntax, which will come with time. And be open to changing your mind if let's say halfway through the exercise you ask a clarifying question to an engineer and then they say something which makes you think, oh, hang on, maybe I've gone the wrong way here. Don't be afraid to actually change direction and shift the approach if you feel that is the correct one ultimately. So that's the coding part of the assessment there. As I mentioned, if you were to pass this part of the assessment, you would then be brought through to the final stage, which would comprise of a system design and domain interview and a behavioural. So I've got two slides here, one on system design and one on system domain. I won't go through everything on these slides because, again, I don't want to just be talking at you during this. You can read everything too. But you will be asked in this interview around the design and architecture for a website and about Linux systems. So, for example, you might be asked to design the back-end infrastructure for a small photo sharing website. So it's obviously really important to know the common components used to build a back-end system fit together. So, for example, web servers, caches, databases. And we'll also dive into Linux topics such as working with the file system as well. So a few tips there on the right-hand side. It's recommended ideally that you draw diagrams that clearly describe the relationship among different system components, and this can be really clear for interviewers in order to gain your thought process. Prepare by coming up with designs for large-scale products and then justifying them to a friend who plays the role of an interviewer. That can be a great way to prep ahead of an interview like this. So that's the system design part, and then moving on to the system domain. So we will assess your knowledge of Unix, Linux, and practical usage of Linux systems. So you don't have to be an expert in all facets of Linux to do well in this interview, and actually having the core knowledge of how the system works is key, but I appreciate that we're not expecting you to be absolute experts in this. So we want to know, how you can explain the core building blocks of how a Linux system operates. So, for example, how systems boot and load, the shell and how it interacts with the underlying operating system, Unix file systems, process management techniques for resource control. And again, to reiterate, while we don't expect you to know all concepts, we do look to see if you have an understanding of the concepts to some degree, maybe some context around that, the significance relationship, etc. So again, we're not expecting expert knowledge, but equally some area of knowledge would be good and certainly would be helpful to you at this point in the process. And then the final part of this final stage then is the behavioural interview. So obviously at Meta, all of our engineers day-to-day work with many different teams, many different stakeholders, and therefore it's really important that all of our hires, but particularly on this program, are able to engage with MetaMates every day. So during this interview, we want to learn how you have worked in a team, dealt with conflict and overcome challenges. And unlike the technical interviews for coding, system design, this interview focuses on your unique experiences. So my best recommendation before an interview like this is to really take a moment to think through your experiences to date. So whether that be your time in another job, maybe another project you've worked on, and think around the experiences you've gained, the skills you've gained from those experiences, and almost kind of stockpile in your mind these kind of experiences and skills that you've gained, ready for the questions that might arise during a behavioural interview. So again, you don't have to use an example that's from a technical project or a technical role. We really want to hear from examples, with regards to all parts of your life that you feel are relevant to the questions that will be asked on the day. So don't feel like you have to keep them super technical. That's not the case at all. But what we would like to know is your reasons and motivations for why you have changed roles in the past, why you find the idea of working in product engineering exciting, why Meta as well, why do you want to join us as an organisation, and why you feel overall, based on the job description, Meta is a good fit for you and this role is a good fit for you. For those of you who have already applied and for those of you who haven't yet applied, regardless, do take a look at the job description page, because that has all of those minimum requirements that we talked through earlier, but also a bit more detail on the role. So just make sure that, taking a look through that material before interviews can be helpful and could refresh your mind in terms of, what's expected of me in this role, what's expected of me at Meta, and therefore you can hopefully then pick and choose those aspects from your answers. So that's the behavioural interview there. And then in terms of accommodation, so if there are any circumstances in which you feel you need an accommodation or you would like an accommodation, then do reach out to myself, to Emily, to the rest of the team as you're coming through the process or just before you apply, and we will do what we can in order to make any accommodations, for example, due to a disability or other factors as well. So do just let us know. We can see what we can do, and we really want to make sure that you're as comfortable as you can be throughout the process and are able to show your best skills and knowledge to us as well. So again, you can reach out to accommodations x@fb.com. If you don't take a note of that now, reach out to myself, and Emily and I can direct you in the direction of that email address as well. And then I think handing back over to Emily.
Thank you. Thanks for all that really great information, Matt, and sharing all of that. I just wanted to take a moment just to signpost some other kind of programs that we offer here at Meta in EMEA. So we have two specific programs that I just want to call out today. Firstly is our Return to Work program. So this is specifically designed for individuals who have been away from the workplace for a considerable amount of time, typically kind of 2+ years, and are looking to re-enter the workplace. So this program is designed to help kind of re-onboard, train and mentor individuals who've taken that time away from the workplace and who want to kind of re-enter and kind of reignite their career. And then the second one is something called rotational engineering. So this is a 12-month program, and I'm sure you can guess my name, is a rotation across different teams within software engineering. And the goal of that is to give people exposure to different teams and get a holistic view as to engineering here at Meta. So from that perspective, we welcome applications from all kind of programmers and aspirational software engineers who are looking to gain that exposure and experience. So I think that kind of wraps everything up from our sort of presentation perspective. And I think that leads us on to questions. I know there's been quite a few in the group. So yeah, I just, does anyone have any kind of verbal questions? There's a few things I can see. Actually, there's one just come through from Tasha in terms of application deadline in the group. Matt, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so what I would say is just try to get your application in as soon as possible. I know that's a bit of a cliche response, but what I would say is we do recruit on a rotational basis and on a rolling basis. So essentially we are processing and dealing with applications all the time. We aren't kind of waiting for a certain deadline and then taking a look at more. We are processing and inviting candidates who are eligible through to CodeSignal all the time. So what I would say is just try to get your application in. Certainly, I would say in the next 2 to 3 weeks, if you can, just so that we can then start moving forward with that. So yeah, that would be my advice, just as soon as possible, just to ensure you stand the best chance of progressing with us.
Matt, there was a question, from someone who emailed me who wasn't able to come live, but they asked to ask this. They just wanted to get clarification on the starting date. So are we right in saying that these roles you're recruiting now, when they're filled, but they all start in the autumn time? Is it late summer?
That's correct. Yeah, so
Okay.
September time will be the start date, exact start date TBC, but it will be September. And the idea being that all of our hires will join at the same time. So there will be a set start date there in September.
Okay, so shall we start going through these, because it's all going a bit mad in the chat now for for more detail. So there's a question there from Polycarp. After each stage of the process, what's the duration of time to get feedback? So I guess, how do you know if you're making it through?
Yeah, it's quite hard to say, because sometimes there are, it does differ from person to person, but I would say typically once you have completed a stage, we would aim to get back to you ideally within around 2 weeks in order to invite you. That would be the maximum in order to invite you through to the next stage of the process. But I would say if you are unsure, then reach out to me, your recruiter, and I can give you a bit of an update on kind of the timeline and things. Please do keep engaged with us, and we'll do the same with you. And if there are any delays for whatever reason, we'll always reach out to let you know that there are delays. But yeah, typically 2 weeks is the maximum. But we've only recently in the last few weeks started the recruitment process, so we're quite early on in kind of the run of things.
Okay, perfect. And then I suppose that ties into Tom's question there about how long is the hiring process. It's probably going to depend a bit on just where you happen to, how voluminous it is. But if there's a few weeks between each process, then or each stage,
absolutely.
Yeah,
and I would say not to worry if you haven't heard after, say, a week or so. That doesn't necessarily mean that you haven't been successful. It's just that we are obviously dealing with large volumes of applications, and we want to make sure that when we do reach out to you, we have, for example, a date for the next stage, rather than just reaching out to you to say, by the way, you've passed. So that's the rationale for that.
Perfect. And then there's a question from James around the third part of the minimum criteria. Sorry.
Yeah, I can take that. It's super small on my screen, but I was able to make it out. So yeah, I mean, the third part is around experience with configuration and maintenance of applications, for example, web servers, internet caches, proxies, SQL storage systems, etc. No, you don't have to have prior experience working with those. It probably does give that impression, all right. But what we do expect is, I guess, that you have some understanding of what the major components of a system might be. Like, what is SQL? What's it for? Querying database. What's a database for? Where does it fit into the overall architecture of a system? You would be asked to. The example that Matt gave of designing a photo server is interesting. Well, like, what are the different components of that? So you expected to be able to talk through that. We don't expect people to have worked with it, and actually don't expect people to know all the answers for sure. But if you ask somebody a question, and even if they get it wrong, as an interviewer, you might poke at them and say, well, what about such and such? You're kind of looking for the thought process about, oh, okay, yeah, that's a good point, and see if they can pivot then to sort of think about here an alternative way maybe to design that based on the feedback that they're getting. So it's really about being able to have sort of an intelligent conversation about how systems are structured and what are the reasons that you might take to structure it like that.
Yeah,
sure.
So, I mean, I know from my own history, I had zero experience with any of that stuff before applying. But what I will say is that if you get past the initial CoderPad stage as well, for both the coding interview and the system design interviews, you will have a recruiter who will be in touch with you at each stage, and they will send you materials in terms of signposting where you can kind of get prepared for each of the upcoming interviews. And also we'll give you an accurate idea of what to expect in each of those coming up. So, I felt that all along the way. So that's something less to worry about as well. Well, I think for the initial CoderPad stage, rather than maybe jumping straight in, a good thing just to have a look at is to take a look around there's loads of websites, whether it's like Code Wars, LeetCode, HackerRank. Just practice doing data structures and algorithms problems. The benefit of that is it can be fun as well. It's a fun thing to practice, and that's the best thing just to prepare for the first stage. But after that, you really are set up. You're helped along the way in terms of your prep and what to expect.
Okay, so a lot of really good infrastructure and encouragement to kind of get you through once the right components are there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of questions around location. So I guess, for today, we've been focusing on the fact that these roles are in the UK and Ireland, so but more specifically Dublin and London, right? And there was a question there about the US. Is this program running in the US as well or not? No.
No,
Okay.
Not currently.
Okay. Okay. So just to be really clear on that, so if anyone, you have to be eligible to be there. I suppose you can make your application from elsewhere, but understand you must be based in one of those to take these roles. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. And something to reiterate that, this isn't a remote role. So
Yeah.
you would need to be in London or in the UK or in Dublin, Ireland, or, in order to be eligible, really. And obviously, if you're in the US, great, that's fine. Obviously there would be some relocation needed there. So I've had quite a few questions around that offline, actually, just around is it possible for the role to be remote at this stage? No, it's not.
No. Yeah. Well, look, it's good, and this is what these sessions are really helpful for, isn't it? Yeah. Oh yeah, Carl.
Sorry, Jane. I was just going to say, correct me if I'm wrong, Matt and Emily, but there is support for relocation and for visas if people for work visas if people need that. Right? So if somebody is not currently in Dublin or London but would like to be for this role, Meta will help you to get here and to have the appropriate work authorization to work there as well.
Okay, well that's a really big piece of news, and it's unusual piece of news as well, that the support structures are in place. So I hope everyone kind of fully understands just that you can make an application even if you're not in those places, and you will be getting support and help in as much as Meta can do to get you there. So that's a huge thing. Okay, so there's a couple of questions. There is this is quite an important one from Craig. So thanks, Craig. And it's not details of salary, but it's just clarity on whether this is like sort of an internship for a year unpaid, and then potentially, or is it a full-time employment for 12 months? And that's the program.
Yeah, so it's a 12-month program and it's fully paid. So it's not an unpaid opportunity. And at the end of the 12 months, there would be a call on whether or not you would, based on your performance, but also your preferences as well, whether or not there's the opportunity for you to continue within the product engineering team full time. Yeah,
and that's what Cara was referencing as well, that there's longevity after this, but the decision will be made at the end of the 12 months. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Got there's loads here, loads of new ones now that I may have missed. So Polycarp is curious about, study materials for the Unix Linux aspect to refresh a candidate's knowledge. So is that a question about some resources, I think, if there's materials there, or should they find them elsewhere?
I know that there's definitely resources supplied around the system design side of things, and around the Unix Linux aspect. I think that there's not a massive amount of knowledge that is required. I would recommend definitely doing your own bit of self-study just around navigating a file system, the basic processes that are happening. There's, I think that there's certain websites like linuxjourney.com is one where it's really very simple laid out. You can get a nice overview of, different Linux aspects. But you will be given, as I say, sort of an expectation of what does come up. There was nothing that came up in any of the interviews that I felt like, oh, well, that seems a bit out of left field. It was very much prepared for, and and the interviewer was there to help you succeed with that as well. So there are other DPEs. I was using Linux myself, but mostly not getting into a real deep dive, mostly making the desktop look pretty. But there are other DPEs that have had very little Linux experience. I had none coming in beforehand as well, so it varies as well. Everybody has different strengths coming in.
Okay, so there was one thing that I don't want to miss, which was a really great question from Joy, and it's just, I think, to go back to what you were pointing out there, Emily, that obviously a lot of the conversation today is specifically pointed on the Discover Production Engineering, the DPE, but you did just kind of give us some guidance towards the fact that maybe if you wanted Meta, but this particular program wasn't for you, there's lots of other structured mechanisms or ways to get on site.
Yeah, absolutely. These are kind of the three offerings that we have currently. The criteria, I think, is a little bit different, but you are welcome to apply to whatever kind of roles you wish to apply. I think I would just call out that there typically, I think, is kind of a maximum of applications that you can apply to in one go. I think it sits between, I think it's around 3 you can apply to at kind of the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So I would just be mindful if absolutely we've got the DP program, return to work and rotational engineering, they're all available to individuals.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. So pick which one that you're committed to and see it through and see what happens. Okay. And then there's a question from Carol. So Carol is saying that she doesn't have work experience. She's been doing the bootcamp program for 4 months. Could she apply as a fresh graduate because she just came from university in computing and technology? So sounds like Carol may have done a computer science degree and is doing the bootcamp, but doesn't have the work experience. So maybe is there any kind of guidance as one of those programs that would be a better route for her, or would the DPE work well?
My understanding my understanding is that she's not eligible for the DPE program. If she is a fresh graduate, she doesn't have that 2+ years of work experience there, unfortunately.
Sure.
Carl, so you mean, sorry, I think you're thinking of the return to work program there. Is that a hard requirement? Sorry, maybe I'm missing a requirement.
So for the Discover Product Engineering, 2+ years of full-time work experience is a minimum requirement.
Okay, sorry.
But they can be in anything.
In anything,
perfect.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, and so and just because sometimes people wonder, I suppose, why this is, but it's really just got to do with the structure of the exposure and the types of kind of training and infrastructure that have been prepared for a certain type of profile, really, isn't it? So it makes sense to try and get people in the right places.
Absolutely, yeah. And there are graduate roles available across Meta more broadly. So this is kind of slightly more of a niche program for those who maybe have had experience in a wide array of possible different disciplines, bringing them together into a single program there for Discover Product Engineering. So I'd say there's probably more graduate programs available than there are programs like this. So I'd say keep an eye on our website, on our career site. All of our graduate roles are listed. And keep they update all the time to keep abreast of that.
Perfect, thank you. So okay, I think we may, unless somebody wants to try and get a question in real quick, I think we have addressed everyone's queries. So there's just, come here guys, there has been so much information in this in the slide deck, in the background information. I've been able to hear Kieran, being able to hear your journey through it is, I think, really just from what I've seen of the admiration in the chat as to your ability and your success, given particularly you're quite early in the course and this was all very new to you. So it's a really nice message for someone that you mightn't realize you're ready, but you just might be. So go and take the leap. There's nothing to lose. It's an application process. You're always going to learn something.
Yep. 100%. And what I would say as well is the interviews are a fun experience because the interviewers, they're all there to help you along. And each of them, they're the nicest interviews I had anyway, because they're there to help you have a conversation, and relax and enjoy the whole process.
Yeah. Cool. Wow. So there's a couple of things coming in there. There was a couple of questions about salary ranges, which I've just addressed by saying that kind of comes up through the interview process, not on a forum here. And then there was a couple of questions there just around after the 12 months, obviously all going well, production engineering could be a good route. But if it's not a good route, I presume there's lots of other pathways. There's no shortage of options internally in Meta if there was other directions that one wanted to take. There was a couple of questions around that, but I guess that's probably
that's
right.
The case.
Yeah.
I mean, if somebody does the program and there isn't a full-time offer at the end of it for whatever reason, or they decide that they don't want to go down that path, but they're interested in a slightly different path, they can certainly go through one of the other programs and follow their passion that way.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's what you were saying as well, because best outcome if you go into this is that you've got 12 months under your belt of a really amazing program in a really, really good structure, and that's something that will just stand, because sometimes reading things out and reading things in is really hard to do from the outside, but being able to immerse yourself in that, experience it, succeed, and then make some decisions is really what it's all about. Okay.
And echo what Carl said earlier as well, that the focus on doing real work is, you know, even from the first week during boot camp, you're writing code that actually exists in Meta, in the code base, and to have real tangible projects and work, you can bring that with you anywhere, you know, to say that you created such and such for a company like Meta. So, you know, even if you don't stay beyond the 12 months, that's invaluable to have.
So, Kieran, we're coming up to time, but you are the one person here, I presume, who has gone through this. You've gone through the interview process, and you've got a room full of people who are probably in the process of making applications. Have you any tips in terms of first steps, how to get that invite to the tech test?
Yeah, well, like I say, the first step is getting through the CoderPad, and after that, you'll be told what to expect. So do as much practice, maybe playing around with data structures, algorithms, do the test. And if you enjoy that kind of challenge, if you enjoy, you know, that can almost be gamification, going through those challenges, then that's already a good sign. So go through as much of them as you can, prepare. Once you feel comfortable taking on data structure, algorithms, challenges, do the test and just relax. The whole process should be fun and a good experience.
Very sound advice. Maybe you'll be back into the recruitment team soon.
Well, we'll see if they keep me after 12 months, we'll see.
Right, yeah. Well, come here. We are literally coming up to time. There's a couple of questions popping in there. This might be you, Emily. It's mainly to do with sort of reapplications and so on. Can you see that one there from Miriam?
Yeah, I can see a few coming here that I'll just try and like cover off quite quickly. There's a question from Brian around 2 years of work experience, not the same company. That's fine. It's 2 cumulative years. So it doesn't need to be kind of like 2 straight years at a company. We recognize that sometimes it's actually about gaining work experience across multiple areas. So that's absolutely fine. It's a cumulative. And then I remember there was a question from Miriam around if you're not successful, do you have the option to apply again after 6 months? Absolutely, we do welcome reapplications. The only caveat to that is that we do run this currently once a year. So it wouldn't necessarily be that you could kind of reapply in 6 months as per some of our other Meta roles. If you want to apply specifically to DPE, you then need to wait for the next kind of recruitment cycle, which would happen a year later. So a year where we are today. But if you were looking to apply to other Meta roles, you would probably need to wait for about 6 months. I want to caveat that as well is depend on the interview process. So if you were going to have a coding interview, yes, you would need to wait 6 months because the unsuccess was due to the coding interview. So it would like the same interview as such. But if you're going for a completely different role but didn't have coding interviews, you could probably re-interview a bit quicker. I hope I've clarified that sufficiently. So I appreciate that's a slight nuance.
Yeah, it broke up a tiny bit, but I think we got the important bit. It's like it just cut out a little tiny bit. But basically, I think obviously the DPE program only happens once a year. So regardless of why you may or may not get through, you haven't got the opportunity to reapply. So that's kind of that. But for other roles, it might just depend based on whether, okay, so kind of case by case basis a bit. Yeah. Okay. Okay, listen, amazing guys, it's coming up to 5 to I'm sorry, I think we do need to release everybody because everyone has stuff to go on to this afternoon. And look, there has been so much information here. Anyone who's listening, please reach out to us if you have any other questions. But really, I suppose the next step now is just get those applications in, put time and thought into them, but get them processed because other people are, and perhaps when these places are gone, they could be gone. There isn't a deadline when the processing begins. It has already begun. So try and get in there. But look, from all of us to all of you, Emily, Matt, Kieran, Carl, thank you so much once again for your time. It's a great partnership. And I hope we'll see some of the people who are in the chat now on the other side.
I was going to say, hopefully somebody's sitting in this seat next year.
Yeah. The hot seat. That room's going to be very crowded next time you're here. Well, look, thank you so much, everybody, for all your time. Have a terrific afternoon and best of luck with processing all those applications, guys. And
Thanks,
best of
Jane.
luck to everyone who's going to be applying. Thank you very much.
Good luck,
Thank you,
everybody.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, cheers, mind yourselves. Bye.